Hello again, everybody. Tim Clash, your instructor here. In this lecture, we're going to talk about Chapter 2, Policing in the American Context. Exactly what does that mean, policing in the American context? Well, we're going to define some of the things that defines policing in modern day society, such as democracy and federalism. What are some of the environmental factors that affect policing today? There are many factors that go into how we think of the police and some of the things that make the police do some of the things that they actually do. And then what is the role of the police in the criminal justice system today? Well, first let's start by talking about what is the difference between a democracy and federalism when it comes to policing. We all should know that democracy is usually defined as a government by the people. In other words, the people run the government. There was once a movie that I watched, and there was a line in it that I absolutely loved. The movie was V for Vendetta. And the line was, government should fear the people should not fear their governments. And I think that holds true today. The government sometimes can get too much power and start exonerating that power too much. So a democracy is actually defined as a government by the people. So we actually run the government, even though sometimes it seems like we don't. We actually should run the government. Then what is federalism? Well, federalism is a political doctrine within power to divide power equally amongst all the branches within our government. We have to have some type of delicate balance to be able to restrain the government from taking over too much power. And that's where federalism actually comes in. So within the democracy and the federalism, the way they work together, they balance each other out to actually give us a wonderful freedom. And sometimes we have to give up some of that freedom to be able to live in the society that we live today. Then what are some of the environmental factors that are affecting police? Well, first, police have to serve and interact with the citizens. If the citizens aren't happy with the police, then just sort of like the old saying, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. So if the citizens aren't happy, nobody's actually going to be happy. That starts putting pressure on the mayor, which is or the mayor or the board of supervisors, or depending on what agency it is. It could be a federal agent, state agency, or local agency. Whoever's over that particular agency, that starts putting pressure on them to start making that police department or that law enforcement agency do what they're supposed to do. The second factor is that government organizations and as such regularly interact with government entities such as city councils and county boards of supervisors. Well, that comes back down to serving and interacting with the constituents. If the constituents aren't happy, the political powers that be are not going to be happy. So we have to make sure that we have a delicate balance between those to make sure that everyone is on board with what we're doing. If they're not, then ramifications are going to be come down. Different policies will probably be instituted, and therefore that's going to come from up above, and then that's not going to make the law enforcement community very happy. The next thing is the media. The media keeps a close eye on the police. Any little wrongdoing that the police does, it's the first thing that leads in a newscast. I used to be in the journalism field many years ago, and we had a saying that if it bleeds, it leads. And I think most of you have seen news, nightly news, and the local news. And what's the first story that they have is usually something very bad, especially if it's something gruesome that happened. So if it bleeds, it leads. That's always been the story. So if we have a vital role in the law enforcement system, it's one thing that we have to keep the media happy, and we, as law enforcement, try not to mess up. A prime example is the officer in Dallas who was just sentenced for 10 years for killing her neighbor. She actually thought she was in her apartment, was not, had pulled like two doubles, was very tired according to her, and did not realize that she was in the wrong apartment and shot her neighbor. Um, Stories like that are going to be the first to hit the news. You're not hardly ever going to see anything good about what the police are doing. We're constantly doing good within the law enforcement field, but the media doesn't care about that because it's not newsworthy. It's not something that people are interested in. They want to hear the bad, not the good. So those are a couple of things that influence the criminal justice field as we see it. Another thing that also influences is police organizations interacting with their peer agencies at various levels of government. In other words, on the local level, we have to have support sometimes from the state, and we have to support them in certain things. We have to work together on the local front and the state front to be able to reduce crime. And the same thing with the federal agencies. If federal agencies come in, local and state have to work like a fine-tuned fiddle within the powers that be able to create an atmosphere where everybody can work together. So we have to be able to work with other police organizations to make sure that all levels of government are fair and balanced. So that brings us to, what role do the police in the criminal justice system play today? Well, if you call 911 and nobody answered, what would happen? Would basically, I'll get it out in a second, basically be plunged into anarchy. The role that police play in the criminal justice process today is a fundamental role of trying to keep peace. That is our main goal. We want to try to maintain peace while deterring crime. If we were not there, the world would basically be like in the Old West days, where everybody just fended for themselves. And that in today's society would not be feasible or possible. Now, having said that, there are certain limits that the police can do, and then that's when getting back to working with other agencies come in hand. If we can't handle it on the local level, we have to be able to depend on our state and federal agencies to come in and help as well. So the vital role of law enforcement today is making sure that the peace and tranquility of today's society is kept stable. Do we accomplish that every day? No, we absolutely do not. Things happen every day. We've all heard it in the news, especially in the larger cities. We are more of a reactive than a proactive agency when it comes to dealing with crime at times. I wish we could do more proactive stuff, but sometimes it's just not possible. So that's a little bit about what's in this chapter. You guys will definitely read over that in chapter 2. Also for this week, make sure that you refer to page 30. That will be part of our discussion for this week. For New York, violating the stop and frisk rule. For those of you that do not know, stop and frisk is basically stopping someone on the street and patting them down because you have some type of reasonable suspicion or probable cause to believe that a crime has taken place. New York violated this particular policy by just going to high crime neighborhoods and stopping everyone that they came into contact with, stopping them, frisking them, just because they were in a high crime neighborhood. So make sure that you read page 30. Make sure that you post a meaningful post. Again, on any replies, I agree. I want to know why you agree and go in depth as to why you agree with that particular person. Again, if you guys have any questions, you can contact me on my cell phone. Again, the quickest and best way to get me is through email. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, and thank you guys very much.